There's a good man within you, Arthur, but he is wrestling with a giant. And the giant wins time and again.
What is it that defines a good man?
I wanted to say the debt's canceled and take this. It won't bring your husband back, I know. You need money and I don't.
Well, you're a good man.
Is it his ability to struggle and persevere in the face of adversity, or the strength of his moral character? In the case of Arthur, we see a man whose heart is permanently scarred by the loss of his loved ones. First, he lost his mother Beatrice when he was a child.
My mama died when I was a kid.
Then he saw Lyle, his deadbeat father, get hanged for larceny.
And my daddy, well, I watched him die.
The first woman he ever loved, Eliza, was brutally murdered by a gang of robbers along with Arthur's son Isaac.
I had a son. He passed away.
All over a measly sum of $10. And the sad thing is, you'd never know any of this unless you did some specific side missions in the game that led to conversations with important characters. The tragic nature of Arthur's character and his journey to redemption is one of the greatest stories ever told, and in this video, I will uncover the hidden truths that shape Arthur's psyche and make him the man that he is. Because you simply cannot understand Arthur's character without first unraveling his traumatic past, which is full of loss as well as sorrow. So let us walk through Arthur's untold story together and piece together the details of what makes him such an interesting character. In 1863, during the American Civil War, an outlaw by the name of Lyle Morgan met a woman called Beatrice, and the two of them had a child, and this child would be called Arthur Morgan, taking on the title of his deadbeat father who lived a criminal's life. Lyle's photo can always be seen and found on Arthur's wagon in camp, but don't think for 1 second that Arthur keeps a photo of his father because he loved him, because in reality, the two had a very strained relationship ever since Arthur was born. Lyle would always be out robbing and threatening people, riding from one town to the next, never once paying attention to the fact that he had a wife and child of his own. It's unclear what made Beatrice fall in love with a man like Lyle, but she must have seen some redeeming quality in him, unlike Arthur, who refers to his father as a no-good bastard in his personal journal. While talking with Sister Calderon at the train station, Arthur reminisces of his past, saying that he watched his own father die and that it wasn't soon enough.
And my daddy, well, I watched him die. And it weren't soon enough.
Knowing the nature of an outlaw and the fact that Lyle never once shared a loving memory with his own son,
How is your father? He's dead a long time. He lived a lot longer than was good for any of us.
it also isn't entirely unreasonable to assume that he was also a drunkard and abused Arthur when he was a child, which explains why Arthur hates him so much and wishes he had died sooner. Still, it's amazing that Arthur keeps a photo of his father on the wagon at all times and retains his hat as well. One cool detail about this hat that ties into classic Western movie tropes is the fact that it's black, a color often associated with evil characters. In contrast, Micah wears a white hat, which is typically associated with good characters and heroes. But we know the true nature of both men, and while Arthur is certainly no saint, he isn't an irredeemable villain like Micah either. In fact, the hat symbolizes the duality of Arthur's nature and how there's a spark of humanity burning underneath his cold, dead heart. A heart that was shattered from a tender age, as he never knew the love of a father or even a mother. Arthur's mother left him when he was a child, but not because she hated him. Beatrice would have loved to see her son grow into a strong and wise man, but unfortunately, her life came to an end before she got the chance to teach anything to young Arthur. The exact reason behind Beatrice's death is never really specified in Arthur's journal, nor does he bring it up in any conversation, but it was probably due to natural causes, and it also happened while Lyle Morgan was away from home. Unlike Lyle though, Beatrice loved her son, and Arthur clearly misses her, because he always keeps a pink-colored flower in a jar by his bedside to honor her memory. This is a plant that his mother loved, and it's also one of the few things that Arthur remembers about her from the short amount of time they spent together.
So I've been meaning to ask, what's that flower you keep by your bed?
Oh, there's something my ma always liked. Kind of a good luck charm, I suppose. They only grow out west, in parts of California and Oregon. I always try to grab one when I'm out that way.
That's nice.
I don't remember too much from back then. I was so young when she passed, but I remember that for some reason.
From a very young age, Arthur had seen death, and it turned him into a loner who didn't know or understand love, until he met Dutch and Hosea. These two men adopted Arthur into their gang, treating him like family, which is also why Arthur was so devastated after Hosea's death, and Dutch's betrayal hit him even harder, because to Arthur, Dutch was like a foster father.
I was gonna say you're like a son to me, but you're more than that.
He taught Arthur most of what he knew, and gave him a purpose in life beyond stealing and surviving. To Arthur, Dutch represented an ideal human being, someone who valued liberty and was willing to sacrifice himself for the people he loved. During Arthur's life in the gang, he met a 19-year-old waitress called Eliza and fell in love with her. The two had a romantic relationship, and Arthur fathered a son with her, a boy called Isaac. All this happened a few years after 1887, which is when the Vanderlyn gang carried out its first major bank robbery, and at this point, Arthur was no longer a petty criminal. He was a hardcore gangster and also a high-priority target for federal law enforcement officers. Despite knowing Arthur's true nature, Eliza accepted him and also didn't turn down any financial support that Arthur offered to her and Isaac. From time to time, Arthur would visit their house and play with Isaac. He grew quite fond of the boy, and you learn about this when you hear Arthur's conversation with Rain's Fall.
I had a son once, years ago. Don't talk about him much.
Oh, what was his name?
Isaac. His mother, Eliza, was a waitress I met. When she got pregnant, she knew who I was, what my life was. I didn't want to promise nothing I couldn't keep, but I said I'd do right by them. Every few months, I'd stop by there for a few days. He was such a good kid. She was too, I guess. Just a kid, 19.
For me, one of the most heartbreaking moments was when Arthur told Jack that he reminded him of another boy he once taught how to fish. A boy who was born well before Jack.
You know, this reminds me. I taught another boy to fish once. A long time ago.
You mean Lenny?
No. No, this was long before I met Lenny. Long before you was even born.
This is understood by many to be a reference to Arthur's own son, and how Jack reminds him of Isaac. So what happened to Eliza and Isaac? Why did Arthur leave them? Well, he didn't. You see, Arthur was an outlaw and couldn't afford to stay in one place with them. He would send them money and occasionally drop by to check on them, but the Vanderlyn gang lived a nomadic life and they were constantly on the move, so Arthur never really got the chance to live with his family or protect them. And this would bite him in the back down the road, because one day when he visited the house, instead of his son running out to greet him, he saw 2 crosses planted on the ground. Arthur's heart skipped a beat as he slowly realized who was buried there, and he found out that both Eliza and Isaac had been murdered by a gang of common thugs for a paltry sum of only $10. $10. That's how much their life was worth to the thieves, and Arthur wasn't there to save them. This failure would haunt him for the rest of his life, and it also taught Arthur that being a criminal meant he couldn't experience the simple joys of life, like having a wife and kid. He was forever doomed to roam the country as an irredeemable thug with a shameful past, and from this point forward, Arthur resigns himself to his fate and casts away all human emotion from his heart, turning into the stone-cold killer that we see when we're introduced to him for the first time in the game. He steals, intimidates, and murders people without a second thought. To Arthur, killing comes as naturally as breathing, and he never gives it a second thought, because in his mind, he's already destined for an eternity in hell, and nothing he will do can change this fact. So there's no point in bothering with trivial things like morality or kindness. This is an extremely nihilistic worldview and turns Arthur into a shell of a human being who exists merely as a tool of Dutch. Arthur has no greater purpose in life, nothing to strive for, and all he cares about is the next big score.
One more big score, we got enough money to leave.
However, it didn't have to be this way. The first time we meet Mary Linton, we learn of Arthur's past relationship with her and the fact that Mary's father hated Arthur because he was a criminal. Arthur shows that he still has some good left in him when he volunteers to rescue Jamie from the weird turtle cult, not because it would help him patch things up with Mary, but because he couldn't bear to see another kid lose his life due to the stupidity of others. Then, Arthur proceeds to selflessly help Mary once more, when her drunk father runs off with a family heirloom to pay off his debts.
That is beautiful.
It's a family heirloom.
That was Mother's
Family for
brooch.
years.
Not any longer, Mr. Gillis. Enjoy the money.
Mary realizes that Arthur has the strength to be a decent person and implores him to run away with her.
Run away with me, Arthur. Run away right now and don't look back.
I want to. More than anything, I want to. But I've got some people I need to take care of. Once they're free, then I'm free. Then I can disappear.
Even after all this time, Mary loves Arthur and he feels the same way about her. But this relationship wasn't simply meant to be. Arthur's heart was too damaged after what had happened with Eliza and Isaac, and he feared that anybody he associated with would also meet the same fate. He turned down Mary's offer, even though it would have been a second chance at leading a proper life away from Dutch's influence. Mary realizes that Arthur isn't ready to change his old ways and reluctantly walks away, hoping that Arthur will change his mind one day. But unfortunately, that day never came. Now that we've got a complete picture of the traumatic events that shaped Arthur's past, we can finally understand why Arthur acts like a jaded cynic. Why is he so distrustful of people and thinks of love as a fool's game? Arthur's internal struggle with his own morality is what defines him as a character. It's why you have a man who's simultaneously charismatic and approachable in front of his friends, yet merciless and vengeful against anyone stupid enough to cross his path. Dutch, through several years of manipulative brainwashing, had created the ultimate weapon in Arthur Morgan. It's sad when you realize Arthur wasn't the only person to fall for Dutch's propaganda. Dutch spun the same web on John, and it almost killed his chance at leading a proper life with Abigail and Jack. And if you think about it, Dutch was ultimately a cult leader who valued blind loyalty above everything else, despite all of his speeches about family and taking care of each other. Remember at the start of the video when Mary told Arthur that inside of him there's a good man, but he's fighting against the giant? The good man is Arthur's humanity, and the giant is the years of brainwashing inflicted upon him by Dutch. Arthur's instincts tell him that what he's doing is wrong, but for decades he had convinced himself that he had no other choice, that he was born into this life. It isn't until Arthur meets Sister Calderon that he learns to trust his heart once more and believe in love. It takes a great deal of strength to fix a broken heart, and Arthur took a leap of faith when he chose to use that remainder of his life in service to someone else. Fortunately for him, that gamble paid off. In the end, Arthur succeeded where he had failed in the past. He couldn't save Eliza and Isaac, but he did save John and his family. Dutch and Micah may have survived as well, but it was Arthur and John who won. Arthur got to die on his own terms, and John got to live a life of peace with his wife and child, carrying forth Arthur's spirit with him.